Okay. Hello, all my University of the East students. How's everybody doing today? Dealing with the heat, right? Been very hot lately. It's tough to do things in this heat. So today's lesson is for August the 24th, 2020, not 1920, 2020. So it's August the 24th, okay? Today we're going to be talking about Korea since 1945. Last week we spoke about Japan since 1945. So we're going to switch to their close neighbor, Korea, and there's a lot of twists and turns in Korea's history from 1945 with a different kind of presidents, governments, assassinations, growing economy, things like that. So I guess without further ado, since it's going to be mixed with a lot of things, hopefully it's something you can enjoy and not to get bored by. Okay? So it feels like I just spoke to you about the end of July, and now today's class is for the 24th of August. So to look at the calendar, it leaves a little more than, well, a week, and then it's September. Wow. Going fast, even though it's hot, so be strong. So let me go to the PowerPoint material, which I think you will enjoy the differences of it. Okay. There we go. Looks like I'm going to have to get my face out of the way. People already know what I look like, so I'm sure you won't forget. And here we go. HIS 103, school code, class code, Asian history. And it's a secret on the bottom, but it's week 8. Okay, we're ready to go here. All right. So your syllabus says 1945, but we know basically from 45 there wasn't a lot going on, and the book talks a lot about the Korean War. So I want to go over the actual growth of South Korea from then until the 21st century. Okay. So South Korea, Syngman-rhee and the First Republic, 1948 through 1960. The Republic of Korea, South Korea, was founded in 1948 as a constitutional democracy. But democracy in South Korea did not exactly flourish, and flourish means to grow very successfully immediately or without qualification. So you'll see that slowness marked the first number of years in South Korea. On the basis of a series of major constitutional revisions, which means they kept on changing the Constitution for whatever reasons or different presidents. And a couple of military coups. A military coup is when the military takes over the government. South Korea has gone through a succession of what are known as 6 different republics since 1948. Wow. The most recent of which began in 1987. Anybody born in 87? I was 1 year old. How about my students? Not sure? Okay. The first president of the First Republic, Syngman-rhee, soon began displaying allegedly, which means accusedly, authoritarian inclinations. An inclination is something somebody says or does, which kind of gives you a hint that they are a certain way. They're kind of like revealing a true part of their personality. And then authoritarian means kind of like a dictator. So soon after he became the South Korean president, he started showing that he might have a dictator style or personality, right? On one occasion, he literally locked up members of the National Assembly until they voted as he desired. So sounds kind of like Kim Jong-un there, right? You don't have the freedom to vote for who you want. You will vote for me. Otherwise, I will not open up the cabinet where you guys are. Although Syngman Rhee was an undoubted Korean patriot, so he loved his country, and nationalist hero, he had spent most of his adult life in exile in the United States. And exile is when you're not allowed to be in your country, and you have to be somewhere else in the world. And this is where he had obtained a PhD, so a very educated man, besides a military background, in political science from Princeton, a high-level university in the United States. He also had an Austrian wife, so his wife was not even Korean. I've taught older Koreans before, and they know this history. I'm not sure about you young guys, if you know about this. From what I understood, she was also very much liked in South Korea at the time, even though she was foreign, and she was not even Asian. This all made him something of a stranger in his own land. That's a very interesting comment. His new country had been plunged almost immediately after its formation into a devastating war with the North. So, plunge is something that goes down quickly. Stocks can take a plunge. They're high one day, the next day they go so low. They fell so hard, so fast. We say they plunged. So right after the Second World War, Korea's won, the Japanese have been defeated. Immediately, Korea starts fighting within itself, the North and the South, right? And that's another reason why I know you know that history. So I didn't want to go into that. I wanted to go into the actual struggle that Korea had and how they went from being so poor to very economically successful. I think it's very impressive, kind of like Japan's impressive, their growth after World War II. So, even after the end of active combat in the 1950s, Korean War was 50 to 52, South Korea long remained one of the poorest countries on earth. So that's why I said earlier the growth was very slow. Even communist North Korea appeared more economically successful than South Korea. This I didn't know until as late as the mid-1970s. Wow. So again, it says appeared, whether that we have not done the numbers here, but I guess, like I said, South Korea struggled for a long time. A US-backed program of compulsory land redistribution did, however, finally destroyed the power base of the old Korean Yangban aristocracy. Okay, so what does that mean? Compulsory means you have to do it. South Korea, my male students have a compulsory, what is it, 2.5 years of Army duty. You have to do it. So the U.S. backed the program of land redistribution for more people that could afford to buy land, and it destroyed the old Korean Yangban aristocracy, which I think was around since the Chosun dynasty. So more opportunities for more people. This was arguably essential because the modernizing capacity, even the tax collecting ability of the late pre-modern Chosun dynasty had been severely hobbled. Hobbled is like injured, right? So they struggled. So their economy was hobbled by the dominance of land-owning, bureaucratic Yangban elite. So these high-level people owned too much land, and they could not collect as much taxes from them as a large group of single-family people. According to data collected during the subsequent Japanese colonial period, which again ended in 45, more than 3/4 of all Korean farmers were still tenant farmers who leased part or all of their fields. So they didn't even own them. These farmers were leasing. A post-colonial 1949 land distribution law finally limited land holdings to 7.5 acres. But even then, it took the mass disruption of the Korean War before this reform could be fully implemented, or meaning started. The tenant farming rate in South Korea then plunged, so there's plunge again. But this time, so going down quickly, rapidly from 49% to only 7%. Wow. The Korean War, therefore, finally completed the elimination of the traditional social and economic order in Korea. Korean society was transformed from a highly polarized hierarchy to a relatively egalitarian community. So that means basically, in a nutshell, it went from most of the land being owned by a small group of rich people to be spread out more for more of the population. A feature that post-war South Korea also had in common with post-war Japan and Taiwan. So they're saying the same things happened in Japan and Taiwan. Okay, so that puts us at the bottom of the middle of the page. Actually, this part up here, we can see the arrow. That's all of 302. So Yishuan, this is the only part I chose of 302, which was the bottom, the intro. And then this is all 303. And now we're going to go to the bottom part of 303. Okay. No, wait a minute. I think I cut this short because I was being kind, which I shouldn't be kind. Students are tough. They need discipline. Oopsie, what's going on here? Something's funky. Okay, something's wrong here, but I'll fix it. Let me go back. Again with the beautiful screen. Okay. So as I look here, I actually cut it shorter. I was being too kind. So actually here on the bottom, if you follow the arrow, Japan and Taiwan, I actually cut 303 short. So I don't know what I'm doing, why I'm being so kind. I didn't get a latte from Starbucks. What's going on? Okay, so this means, okay, Lishuan, I finished again. 302's here. 303, all I've chosen. I chose the middle juicy part. So I'm going to combine the two questions. All right. 302 and 303. Whiteboard time. Pencil. I think because of the heat, my students are too tired to try and steal the pencil, which is okay. I understand. Okay, why did this thing jump? Bad, bad, bad. Okay. Okay, okay. What happened in 1948 in South Korea? Again, this will be easy to find. Let me see. I'll give you some hints. Was it the first McDonald's was opened in Seoul in 1948? Was it the last tiger was killed in South Korea in 1948? Or was it Kim Tae-hee was born in 1948? Those are my three hints. On to question 2. Okay, PR. I'm going to North Korea. Is that you, Pamela, with that horn honking? Okay, let me stretch this out for you. Yay. Well, okay. Okay, in the 1950s, Korea remained what? So Temujin, don't get funny and say, 1950s, Korea remained Korea. That's not the answer. So would it be in the 1950s, Korea remained the world's capital for kimchi? Possibly. Or the old nickname for Korea. In the 1950s, Korea remained the hermit kingdom. Okay, hopefully you'll find out there. On to question 3. Okay, let me stretch this one out for you. Stretch. Go down, touch your toes. Get past the big belly, touch your toes. Korean society was transformed to what kind of community? Okay. Was it transformed to K-Town? Was it transformed to Garden Grove? What's the answer? So let me give you a few minutes to write those down. Let me make my markings. Mark down that I asked you these questions. Okay. And then mark down the pages that we've done. Again, for Lishwan and Wani, we have completed 302 and 303. So we're moving pretty fast. What can I say? You guys are a smart group. Okay, I guess it's time for me to get the eraser. Eraser time. Again, repeating what happened in 1948 in South Korea. I will say that that was when the first McDonald's opened in Seoul, even though there was no McDonald's in the United States yet. Oopsie. Gone. 2. In the 1950s, Korea remained what? Korea. Temujin told me. 3. Korean society was transformed to what kind of community? And Mr. Hong says K-Town and K-Town. Okay. So we're ready to go back to that delicious reading material? Okay. Here we go. So if you remember, here, follow the arrow. Down here, Japan and Taiwan. That's where I chose to stop it. That would be 303. So we're going to move on next to 305. This is 305. And for Wani and Lishwan, I condensed this to, so look towards the start here with after seizing power as the second paragraph. Second paragraph, okay? Not the first one. Like I said, I eliminated a lot of unnecessary, redundant or repeating things so we could get to the meat of the issue, okay? All right. After seizing power, which means taking power, during his first months of office, Park Chung-hee established an economic planning board and announced a 5-year plan for economic development. As his first 5-year plan was being implemented or started doing it, beginning in 1962, banking was also placed under the control of the Ministry of Finance and the state-run Bank of Korea. By 1970, 96% of all Southern or South Korean financial assets were government controlled. Okay. Only 4% were privately controlled. A strong government there. at that time, 1970. This meant that excuse me, oh, too much soju. This meant that in addition to tax incentives, so incentives are some things that you want, and control over licenses and permits as tools for promoting planned industrialization. The government also held critical control over investment capital. Wow. Low interest bank loans, often even at negative real estate or real interest rates. The average net cost to business of loans for heavy industry in the 1970s has been estimated at minus 6.7%, allocated or given by the government, then became a key tool in promoting industrialization. So I did my best to cut through those business terms for you, or banking terms. Onto some more interesting Korean cultural terms. Such loans were vital or important, very important, to the development of what would become South Korea's distinctively huge chaebol, or conglomerates. The Korean word chaebol is written with the same two Chinese characters as the Japanese word zaibatsu. Maybe there's some zaibatsu people here, but I think Ria is my only Japanese person in class, so I don't know if she owns a large company. Maybe she owns Sony. And the two are somewhat similar phenomena or things. Essentially, what they are holding companies, don't forget, controlling a range of highly diversified interests or enterprises. So they don't only have investments in one thing. Okay? Among the largest and best known Korean chaebol are Samsung, Hyundai, and LG. There's possibly Hong Industries, which has diversified enterprises like the Saba Saba. So that could be a number 4. These chaebol were nearly all new after World War II and remained largely family-owned and managed. The founder of Hyundai, for example, had begun life working at the docks at the port of Incheon, so that's in the Bay, in the 1930s. And as an errand boy is someone that, the modern day term is gopher. And that's when the high level people say, go get me coffee. Take my clothes to the cleaners. Here, write this memo, do this. So he was an errand boy at a rice mill in Seoul. Wow, humble beginnings to what he later became. In 1940, he bought an auto repair shop. After World War II, he developed construction contracts with the US military, eventually including such activities as highway construction for the Americans in Thailand. So my Thai students here, hey, same, right? And dredging, and that's when you dig on the ocean floor in Vietnam. But I don't think I have any Vietnamese students this quarter in class. It's too bad. By the early 1970s, Hyundai was building the largest shipyard in the world in South Korea. at Ulsan. I wonder if anybody in here is from Ulsan. I know Mr. Hong is from Koang, right? That's where he's from. Young Peel is from Karibondong, I think. Yeah. So anybody from Ulsan here? I don't know. Okay. So that brings us, Wani and Yishwan, that brings us to the end of what I chose for 305. So let me get on to the questions. Oh my God, what was that? Time to get the pencil. So this will take me to question number 4. What did Park Chung-hee establish? Stretch it out. Okay, so again, to try to make it easy, I could say something like, what did Park Chung-hee do? What did he get? But establish is actually, if you can find this word, you can find the answer. So you'll know what the answer is in the reading. I'm just trying to make it easy for you. So my hints, what did Park Chung-hee establish? Did he establish the first Korean baseball team? Is that what he did? I used to play for the Doosan Bears, but did he establish Korea's first baseball team? Did he establish Korea's first pizza restaurant? What did he do? But if you look for this word, you'll find the answer. Okay, ready for 5? Five. What does chaebol mean in English? Okay. I had a student one time. Oh, chaebol, it's a pork dish in Korea, kind of like a pork daktoritan. That's what chaebol means. So if you think that's what that means, you can write that down. Or maybe it's more like a gyoza. It depends. I don't know. I'll have to call my friend Chiba Shinichi and ask him about the gyoza. Or maybe I'll meet him in my favorite restaurant in Tokyo. But I'm going to make him pay. Okay, do I have any more on this page? Yes, I do. Sorry, folks. Number 6 question for 305. Page 305. So 5 is going to be connected to, or 6 is going to be connected to 5. If you know 5, then you should be able to do 6. And the answer will be in the vicinity. Okay. Name the most famous Korean chaebol. So there's a few, not only one. You know my routine and the test. You give me one, you won't get as many points as the fellow that does two or three or four. So name the most famous Korean chaebol. Okay, my hints would be chopok tteokbokki, agashi gopchang, or Saba Saba Club. Those are the most famous Korean chaebol. So you don't have to agree with me. So I'll give you a few minutes to write those down. Let me make my markings. Okay. Again, I'm marking off 305 Nichuan. Or maybe number 4 would be the famous chaebol Sukara Chakara. Could be another one. Okay. You guys working on those, writing them down? Like I said, you can go over the recording later and play with the answers. Jokon, if you feel like. It is hot. Hot, hot. So, ladies, please don't wear a bikini or you'll get arrested by the LAPD. And I guess men too, do not wear bikinis because you'll also get arrested. Or maybe not. Maybe the men can wear bikinis and they won't get arrested. Times have changed. It's a good idea. Okay. Onto the eraser. Number 4, repeating. What did Park Chun-hee establish? I'm going to say he established the first Korean baseball team in South Korea, the Busan Bears. I forget where the Wyverns are from, but you know, what can I say? It's been a long time since I played. I played first base with a big chair. A 5. What does chaebol mean? And I'm gonna go with it's a spicy pork dish similar to daktoritang, but you know daktoritang has a chicken, but chaebol has pork. That's my hint. And say in Spanish, seis. Name the most famous Korean chaebol. Again, tteokbok tteokbokki, maybe sukara chakara, agashi gopchan, or my old standby, mogole sagale. Okay, those are my hints for 6. So, shall we erase now? We have to proceed to the wonderful lecture material. So you see, we stopped down here, the world in South Korea. And that was 305. We're going to move on, Lishwan, and 182 308. 308. Right? All right. So democratization or democratization and globalization. So the first one just means making it a democracy, not being under a dictator like a Kim Jong-un. Okay, that's the ticket. And then globalization is seeking to have a world market for your country, which was not common at the time, especially for a country that started out as poorly as South Korea. October 26th, 1979, after dinner in a Korean CIA or KCIA, Korean CIA, which I think John Wah worked for, building located near the presidential Blue House in Seoul. Has anybody been to the Blue House? I was outside of the Blue House in Seoul, and the security told me to get the hell out of there, so I was not able to go inside. President Park Chung-hee was shot to death, oh my gosh, by his dinner companion, the head of the Korean CIA. You guys know this? Apparently because of a disagreement over how to control recent student and labor unrest, so protesting by workers and college students. Following the assassination of President Park, that's what they call it when you kill a president or king or high-level person, on December 12th, a gun battle erupted. Erupted means exploded. We usually use erupted for a volcano. A gun battle erupted in the streets of Seoul between opposing detachments of South Korean soldiers, which ended with an attack on the Ministry of Defense and the arrest of the defense minister and the martial law commander, ostensibly or supposedly in connection with President Park's murder. And my young people, if you don't know, the prior president of Korea, Park Geun-hye, this was his daughter, or she is the daughter. This was the beginning of yet another military coup or takeover. This time orchestrated, has nothing to do with music, but means in charge, by Major General Chun Do-hwan. Chun Do-hwan, born in 1931. Is this guy still alive? I wonder. Wow, he would be 89 right now. As General Chun gathered the reins or control of power into his own hands, in May 1980, he declared martial law, closed all universities, and suspended the National Assembly. Okay, martial law is when the government says everybody has to be in their house by 8 o'clock. No walking the streets, no going to the store, no going to Sava, no restaurants. 8 o'clock, that's it. You can leave your houses again tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. That's what martial law is. He closed universities and suspended the National Assembly. This spark or ignited or started protests. More protests. Wow, can we get more? Notably in the southwestern Korean city of Gwangju. Anybody from Gwangju? I lived a long time in Tuju. People say, what is Tuju? Tuju is between Gwangju and Dreju. Okay. University students were joined in the streets by citizens. Uh-oh, everybody's getting involved now. And for a few days, the demonstrators controlled the city. Not good. Army special forces were sent in, however, and the disturbance was crushed or defeated with 191 officially acknowledged deaths. Chun's government assumed control over all Korean television networks and began large-scale purges of the bureaucracy. So, a purge is when you try to erase something or wipe something out. Bureaucracy are people in high-level government. I think that was a wild bird that flew by right now. Screaming. I don't know. I hope Pamela or Caroline weren't trying to shoot it. This brings me to, oh, was I kind again? Oh, 2K. Wowzers. Yeah, I cut this page short too, Li Xuan. So actually bureaucracy right here, which I just explained. That's going to be it for 308. Yes, so that means question time. Too kind. Teacher's too kind. Send your money to bbossdane@gmail.com. Cash only. Okay. Whiteboard. So on 308 here, I will have only 2 questions, though. Again, being too kind as usual. What's going on? Did I get the pencil? Or did Prudevi steal the pencil? This brings me to question 7. So question 7, what happened on October 26th, 1979 at Korea's Blue House? Let me stretch it out. Okay. If you don't, for people who are not Korean and you don't know what the Blue House is, it is where the president lives. Just like here, we have the White House, and it has blue. The place, I don't think it's blue from what I remember before I got kicked out by the police. But there's blue tile at the top of the Blue House. So what happened that day? So again, if I have one of my funny students, like maybe Lesak will say, oh, they painted the Blue House pink. I don't think that's what happened. So, like I said, I only have 2 questions here. So, pile 8. Who succeeded President Park? Who succeeded this fellow? Okay. For my Korean students, they will know who I'm talking about. And since this is about the history of basically South Korea, Okay, my choices, let me see. Who succeeded President Bach? Was it Oktomja or Andre Kim? Who else? Oh, Kahodong. Yeah, those three guys. Which one? I would go with not Oktomja. He's not smart enough, but maybe Kahodong is strong to succeed President Bach, right? Yeah. So those are the only two I have. Again, that would be 305. No, no, no. This is sorry, 308. Yeah, 308. Ending with bureaucracy. See, so I got to make my marks here. Yep. Okay, those are the questions asked. Let me mark the page for Wani and Nishwan. 308 is done. It's Pamela again honking that horn. Pamela, I'm teaching. I can't leave with you to rob that liquor store. See, she won't wait. She's pushing me. Okay, you guys still writing these two? Okay, I guess I can go tall. I'll ask you permission. Tall, can I go for the eraser? You said no. Okay, maybe next time I'll ask Tugs Jagal. Oh, your husband, Temujin, said I can do it. Okay, so at least he said he was your husband. He could be lying. 7, what happened on October 26, 1979 at Korea's Blue House? According to Lesuk, they painted it pink. Okay. Pal, 8. Who succeeded President Bach? I'm going with Kahodong, but again, you can choose Andre Kim or Oktomja. Okay. All right, those are done. Let me proceed back to the lecture material. So we stop down here at bureaucracy, which means we're done with the shortened version of 308. And I'm going to proceed to page 310. 310 at the top. And the top of 310 is neon lights. This is really interesting. I didn't know this. I don't know why he banned them. I have no idea. Right? So anyway, I mean, if you see old films of Tokyo or Taiwan or Hong Kong, there's neon lights everywhere. Why President Park Chung-hee? Strange. Maybe I'll have to find an old timer from Korea and ask them. So neon lights were banned under President Park Chung-hee. And television broadcasts, except for the U.S. Armed Forces Network, were only in black and white until 1982. A midnight to 4 a.m. curfew was in effect all the way to 82. I had no idea. And curfew was, again, you know, like the martial law thing. We had curfew here recently with when we had the protesters, aka rioters, in the street, and then the local government said, "Okay, once it gets to be 7 o'clock, go home." And all the good people like you and I just stayed home. Protesters stayed in the street protesting, so they got arrested. Imports of foreign consumer goods were often restricted, and buying foreign was discouraged as being patriotic. The same thing happened here when I was a kid. So we started receiving products from Japan, and you would see On the back of the products, it would say made in Japan, or we would see things made in Hong Kong. And there were people at the time saying, well, you shouldn't buy that stuff. You're not being patriotic. You don't love your country. So this is what was going on in Seoul, and I guess the rest of Korea at that time. To protect the domestic automobile industry, which means Korea's automobile industry, the import of finished automobiles was prohibited until 1987. So what that means to me is they would only accept parts, not a complete, let's say, American or German car. Very interesting strategy. By the 1980s, things had begun to seriously change. In the space of a single generation, South Korea had moved dramatically from what had still been a poor and largely peasant or poor people society in the 1940s through the 50s to a modern, industrialized, which means they had industries, and increasingly affluent. Affluent means rich, urban means city, middle class society. Oh, Mani Joaheo, that's good stuff. Something like 42% of South Korean people now lived in the single metropolis, or metropolis means huge city, uh, of Seoul. Not giving me numbers for Busan yet. These new Korean people were not merely urban or city, but also modern and sophisticated. Seoul boasted strikingly high concentrations of PhDs, and especially high levels of broadband computer internet connections. Korea got very good with internet products, just like Japan. Koreans were the first in East Asia, for example, to digitalize the Buddhist scriptures for CD-ROM distribution, because at the time it was predominantly a Buddhist country. Now, as of now, I wonder if any of you can tell me Korea in East Asia is the country with the fastest growing population of which religion? It's not Buddhism. Can anybody guess? I'll wait 20 minutes and then I'll come back for the answer. How's that? You know, I can't do that because I'm teaching on the computer. It's Catholicism. They're really, really growing with Catholics in South Korea. Very interesting. In the 1990s, Korea also became a net investor nation, investing more money than it received. So basically, excuse me, we're at the end of the first large paragraph on 310. Okay. With the boom, which means explosion, of the 1980s, wages or salaries went up sharply. So people started making a lot of money. Automobiles began to fill the once nearly empty streets. And import restrictions finally began to be lifted or removed. I work with a Korean fellow that I guess left maybe the late 80s. So as this boom was starting, and he just went back last year and he did not recognize Seoul at all. He said, what happened to the mud roads? And what are all these skyscrapers? And what's going on? He felt like he was in the He was an alien, he said, on a different planet. So a lot of things happened from the 80s. Okay, so let me continue here. We're still going to be on 310. So we just finished the large paragraph of the top. So this will be the middle area. Beginning in 1989, for the first time, passports became easily available to South Koreans wishing to leave the country. And realize in North Korea, this is still not the place. Most people cannot leave the country. No passports. And foreign travel has since become much more common. So a lot of my Korean students over the years, I've been teaching in K-Town for quite a while. And, I guess when I first started, the honeymoon place for Koreans was Jeju-do. And the last 10 years, people are going everywhere. It used to be Guam, Philippines, Hawaii, now it's Cancun. So that international travel has really blossomed for South Korean people. Continuing, Koreans increasingly are inclined or they lean to make purchases based on judgments of price and quality rather than for patriotic national considerations. So if they feel they get a better deal and higher quality with a German car, they will not buy a Hyundai, right? That's how they feel, I guess, culturally. Large Western discount stores, such as the American Walmart and the French Carrefour, made their appearance in American music, movies, and cola became the rage among young Koreans. Popular sports, with the exception of the Korean martial art Taekwondo, are now almost exclusively Western style. I think Lee Suk is a black belt in Taekwondo. I have to go to his dojang. As late as 1995, I think I was born in 95, something like that. There had still been only 26 golf courses in South Korea. So that's 25 years ago. But a decade later, 2005, there were nearly 1,000. Anybody knows, as I do, but my students from Japan and Korea, we know that golfing is expensive in both countries. A lot of my Korean students will go to China to save money, but yet, so popular and the economy grew, it went from 26 10 years to 1,000. So that increased 974 golf courses. Wow. So that brings me, I don't want to chop anybody off here, to the last bottom huge paragraph on 310. In 1996, it was estimated that 58% of South Koreans ate at Western-style restaurants. 40% said they preferred sleeping on Western-style beds instead of on the floor, Korean style. I am strange. I prefer sleeping on the floor. But I also prefer sleeping inside of a cave because my father was a bear. It remains noteworthy or attention here, though, that a sizable majority of Koreans apparently still do not prefer Western style beds. Though a process of selective amnesia, and amnesia is where you forget what you did, where you were, a lot of times who you are, and people do get this sickness once in a while. Selective means you choose to do it right? So it's not really truly amnesia. Uh, the foreign origins of many of those, and origins is the beginning points of those originally Western items that have been widely accepted, such as computers, blue jeans, and modern commercial pop music, can be conveniently forgotten, while special emphasis on simultaneously or at the same time be placed on the relative handful of remaining distinctive Korean national cultural markers, such as the eating of kimchi, spicy Korean cabbage, and speaking the Korean language. Uh, when I went to Seoul, let's say 5 years ago, I was in Gangnam. I went to the Coax Mall, and I was specifically looking for the kimchi museum that I knew was inside the Coax Mall. And when I got there, it was still there, but it was closed. And security in the mall told me it is closed for good and it shall not reopen. It just closed the week before. So I missed going to the kimchi museum, the Coax Mall in Gangnam, and I wanted to go because they gave free kimchi samples. I didn't have any money, so I thought I would get the double up from eating the free kimchi. So no luck for me. These non-Korean items that remain conspicuously foreign. So there might be a few conspicuously is like kind of like purposely foreign. And here it says, meanwhile, may still not be very enthusiastically welcome. Okay, so what they're trying to say here about kimchi, it's kind of changing now, and we'll see why, because I'm only talking about the 90s here, so things will change in early 2000s, as you can see. But certain items from certain cuisines become very popular in the West. And after a while, people forget where they actually come from. So sushi became popular here from Japan. Most recently, poke, ramen. Then you have items from like Mexico, like tacos, burritos. Actually, burritos are from here, but anyway. So they become so popular in the West, people forget after a while. But I guess it's the strong smell and taste of kimchi, and the United States was not a traditional culture that liked spicy food or food with a very strong smell. So if I talk, for example, about the word condiments, until the early 1990s or middle 1990s, traditionally, and you'll see them on traditional American restaurants, we always offered in American restaurant ketchup and mustard as the condiments. And ketchup was, since the beginning of the US, I guess, number one. But in the early 90s, it was defeated, and the new number one was salsa, which again came from the Mexican culture. But there was one twist, right? And I don't think that they will do this for kimchi. Traditional Mexican salsa is spicy. So the companies that were making it popular here, they had to make it not spicy. And it became number one, right? So no jalapenos, and lay off on the spiciness, and then it became one. If it was still just a traditional spicy, it would not be number one. Ketchup would still be number one. So that's why I say if I was a Korean, I would try to make some kind of sauce and a change to it, like the Mexican companies did, and I might become a millionaire, right? I mean, look, we had what's the one from Vietnam? Sriracha. So things go in cycles here. So my Korean students, if you can think of how to change maybe gochujang or make a kimchi steak sauce without the spiciness, you could become a millionaire. And if you do, since I gave you the idea, you have to give me 50% of the profit. Okay. Again, my email accepts the payment. So that's why these Korean items, they remain foreign, meanwhile, may still not be very enthusiastically welcome. Okay. So continuing on to the right. Um, the first McDonald's opened in Seoul in 1988, even though I knew an Ajuma student who said she thought it was open in the 70s. So, book says 88, I guess for the Korean Olympics. For example, but McDonald's has grown more slowly in South Korea than elsewhere in East Asia. One reason for this may be because the hamburger does not fit easily into pre-existing Korean food categories, which typically consist of dishes served to accompany rice. This has kind of changed now because we've had so many students like yourself, young people, that have come over to the States and fallen in love with the In-N-Out and Shake Shack, that the burger acceptance has quite grown in Korea. I enjoyed the Lotte burger, so things change quickly, right? But this should be equally true of many other Asian cuisines and is not an entirely adequate explanation for Southern Korean resistance to McDonald's. Okay, so again, every place has different likes and dislikes. I guess that's why they say Big Macs can taste differently in different countries. And then the menus can change too. I had a Big Mac in Hong Kong a few years ago. It tasted just like here. So did the Big Mac in Jeju-do. I go there for my secret business dealings with the president of South Korea. But when I was in China, I could not even identify the hamburger, and that was in Beijing, outside the Forbidden City. And Japan had a special menu. They even sold hot dogs in Yokohama at the time, and some kind of hamburger with a lot of Kewpie mayonnaise and extra cheese. So the menus can't change. So that brings you to the bottom of 310. So it's question time. How many questions do I have on 310? Oh, okay. La la. For you guys, whiteboard, pencil. Nine. I don't want to write Frisco. Okay. Korea was the first East Asian country to do what? So let me stretch it out for you. pen. Where's my pencil? Pencil. Okay. Oops. I need two L's there. Uh, 1989. See, I'm giving you all the dates. I'm not asking you for the dates. I'm being too kind. In 1989, Koreans were finally able to acquire what? What could that be? Rolex watch. Korean ladies could finally get a Prada bag or some Gucci shoes. What was it? For me, when I go to Korea, all I want to do is buy my got. That's all I want to do. Okay. And yes, I have 3 on this page because it's a long full page. Okay. But, you know, I'm writing the dates as you see. Don't worry. And then the strange numbers. Whoops. Okay. Last one for 310. In 1996, 58% of South Koreans preferred what? They preferred a latte burger over McDonald's. What was it they preferred? They preferred Outback Steakhouse over traditional Korean bulgogi. Please let me know. I'll give you some time to write those down. Let me make my markings. Okay, let me get rid of these. Eraser time. 9 is done. 10 is done. 11 is done. Okay. All right. Back to the material. So we ended here, McDonald's. That was the end. So we're going to come up to 311 now. So that'll be here for Li Xuan. Where's I? There it is right here. As citizens of a relatively small country with strong recent memories of foreign colonial domination, that was by Japan, and attempted forced assimilation, Koreans may understandably be particularly sensitive to fears of foreign cultural imperialism and the possible loss of Korean national identity. So they don't want things to become too American. As late as 1993, South Korea, alone in Asia, still refused to allow the then phenomenally popular American pop star Michael Jackson to perform there. Did not know this. I don't remember this, that he tried to perform in South Korea. They did not allow him to. Wow. Despite the fact that few countries in the world had made as public a commitment to the ideal of globalization as South Korea did in the early 1990s, by the end of that particular president's term in office, 1993 to 1998, the Republic of Korea's global competitiveness rankings had actually declined. Wow. In 1997, South Korea was even obliged or made to accept the largest bailout, $58 billion, thus far in the history of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, to avoid financial breakdown. So they were helped by this international organization. The paradox is kind of like something good and bad happening at the same time, of eager globalization combined with conspicuous failure. So they weren't paying attention how they were spending the money. May have been less due to any inherent defects in the globalization model, however, than it was simply the result of a combination of circumstances with remaining serious imperfections in the globalizing reform procedures. So that's a lot of mishmash, saying basically they followed the globalization model, but there was a lot of bad things that happened that really caused this need for the extra money. Not that they failed or the model failed. Okay. Okay, so we're in the middle of 311 up here. While the chaebol had contributed or continued to grow in size in the 1980s and 90s, liberalization of the economy and deregulation, so they took a lot of rules away, made it simultaneously harder for the government to impose any discipline on them. At the same time, the need of politicians for donations gave businesses increased leverage over the government itself. So these donations helped them not depend on the government. In 1995, for example, reformist prosecutors or lawyers uncovered a secret slush fund of $285 million that had been accumulated by former presidents. So secret money is a slush fund. Chun Doo-hwan. In the 1990s, deregulation of Korea's financial systems in the name of globalization also brought in a flood of mostly short-term foreign debt, and Korean banks, accustomed to never having to make careful risk assessments because it was assumed they could always rely on government bailouts, permitted some rather dubious or unproven investments. Unfortunate circumstances made their appearance at this point as the speculation involving Thailand's currency, city mooch, known as the baht, in July 1997 touched off a devastating financial crisis that swept across much of Southeast Asia. What happened with the baht? Most of the Confucian, that comes from Confucius, East Asia, notably People's Republic of China, proved relatively immune, or, they're not going to get destroyed by this, to the so-called Asian flu, but South Korea found itself badly exposed. The Korean stock market lost half of its value, and by 1998, some 20,000 Korean firms had gone bankrupt, including 10 of the top 30 chaebol. Okay, so we're at the bottom of 311. Let me make sure okay, meanwhile, in 1997, opposition party candidate Kim Dae-jung, 1924 to 2009, won the presidential election. Marking the first democratic transfer of power to the political opposition in the history of the Republic of Korea. This is going to extend me over. With the start of the new millennium, it would appear that South Korea's democracy as well as its market economy, have both matured considerably. In June 2000, President Kim Dae-jung flew to Pyongyang, where Alex is from, where he was received surprisingly graciously by North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. That same year, President Kim was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his contribution to peace and democracy and to the reconciliation with the North, or reunification, if that helps you better. Okay, so I'm going to proceed to 312 and the very last part. In the 21st century, a so-called Korean wave of excitement for South Korea television programming, dubbed, for example, in Mandarin Chinese, movies, music, and other pop cultural items, as well as for the material products of the Korean industry, such as cell phones and automobiles, have swept across much of Asia. In the Chinese-speaking world, South Korean pop culture imports currently seem hotter than even the Japanese products. That's why my band, and I'm the leader, BTS, were so popular all over the world. History, of course, never ends, and there will continue to be difficulties and uncertainties. In 2009, for example, there was a renewed nuclear scare involving North Korea, and a former South Korean president, hounded by accusations of bribery, tragically committed suicide by jumping off a cliff. Whatever the future may bring, however, there can be no doubt that the Republic of Korea has made truly stunning or shockingly exciting achievements in little more than half a century since it was born in 1948. Okay, so you're ready for, I think I have one more question. Only one? That's too bad. Okay, I have one more question for that nice big reading. So, okay. Let me get the pencil. You ready for the question? Okay. This will be question 12. Make sure I see it correctly. Oops. You put the right symbols here. What was the Korean wave of excitement? Let me stretch this out for you. So we just read the very last part, into the 21st century. And yeah, so what was the Korean wave of excitement? Oh, let me fix the spelling. It doesn't even say, you know, spell check. Wow. Excitement. Okay. All right, so let me mark off. That was our last, actually 2 pages, 11 and 12. Was the last question. Okay. Okay, so what was the last Korean wave of excitement? I would say all the many Korean barbecue restaurants that have come to the United States. Okay, that's my hint, but I could be lying to you. All right, so make sure you write that down. I'll give you a second, and then we shall be done for today, August 24th, 2020. Okay, you done there? Okay, good for you. So I'll erase it, and I shall say Goodbye to my students. If you're a good student, goodbye. If you're a bad student, I don't know you. It's the way that goes. Let me see, head back here. Now I want to try to end this. Excuse me. Okay, there I am. Hey, I'm still here. Okay, so bye everybody. And I'll see you in another week, okay? Take care.